I'm joined here with Dr. Martha Klein. She is a veterinary nutrition specialist, and she works with our friends at Red Bank, or Compassion First now at Red Bank Vet Hospital. And she's one of the only few practicing nutritionists in private practice. And we've had her on the show before. We talked about many wonderful things, but today we just want to concentrate on talking about the grain-free diets. And I don't know if you've heard in the news or read that they're looking at evidence with respect to grain-free diets leading to cardiac issues in dogs. Now, what I'll do is I'll leave it at that. So, Martha, thanks so much for joining me. I'm really glad we worked out the technical glitches to get this to work.
Yes, me too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so as the news reports are going on, they'll show pictures of a young golden and say that, typically this breed doesn't get the dilated cardiomyopathy, but due to the grain-free diets, they're getting these things. But can you just break it down for our listening audience in that the whole trend? Why don't we just talk a little bit about the history? Why did grain-free come into the mix? And then it's less specifically the grain, right? It's the actual whole combination of the diets that are leading to this.
Right. And we'll definitely talk about that. But kind of going back to the beginning is looking at grain-free diets as a whole. So grain-free diets, for me as a nutritionist, has been more marketing than it has been science. And to quote Dr. Lisa Freeman and a paper that was published in JAVMA, which is the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association, is that the marketing of pet food has really outpaced science. And so I think that's a really important thing for owners to recognize, is that the grain-free aspect of pet food and that becoming very popular in pet food has been more marketing than science. So there was never any papers that were published or anything that happened that changed our knowledge about pet food that made us say, okay, we all need to put our clients on grain-free pet foods. It more came out of marketing than anything. So when we're looking at what I would call diet-associated cardiomyopathy, there's really been two categories of this. There's been dogs that have had taurine-deficient cardiomyopathy, and so that is where we test taurine, which is a conditionally essential amino acid, and that is low. And when we supplement that and change their diet and treat these dogs appropriately, they get better. But there's also a group of dogs that are not taurine deficient that have a diet-associated cardiomyopathy. So when we change their diet, and many of these cases are being supplemented with taurine, even though they're not low, and the veterinarian is treating them appropriately, their heart disease gets better. There is also a third group that's not diet associated, that is genetic. We see that in certain breeds of dogs. The classic one that I think of is Doberman Pinschers, and that's not going to be diet related. So we typically don't see that reverse.
And so getting back to this, so I can't tell you how many times, in fact, I would say greater than 60% of the time in the examination. So one of our questions when we actually bring a pet in and we get the history is, what diet are you feeding? And 60% of clients are, and they'll blatantly say it to me, like when I walk in the room, yeah, they're on a grain-free diet. And so what would your advice be to those veterinarians that are struggling with this? What sort of answer would you give when a client goes, yeah, I'm on a grain-free diet?
So what I would say is, one, looking at, is one, helping owners are asking them why they chose that diet in the first place. So did they choose that diet because they fell into the marketing of pet food, believing that diets that have grains included in the diet are somehow inferior to diets that are grain-free? So if they've kind of fallen into that from a marketing standpoint, then often it's good to educate pet owners that it really came out of marketing than science. Another common reason I see owners feed grain-free diets is because they're concerned about allergy, whether that most dogs are going to manifest that through their skin or through their gastrointestinal tract. So it's important to realize that food allergy, true food allergy, one, the diagnosis of that is typically done through a food elimination trial with a therapeutic diet that is either has the proteins broken down really, really small, like they do in hypoallergenic baby formula, or using a novel protein, so giving them a protein source they've never seen before. There aren't any validated saliva or blood tests that I would recommend that help to rule in or rule out food allergy. So, and then the other thing is food allergies are actually are not as common as people would think they are. I would say food intolerance is probably much more common. So intolerance would be like me going out and eating a very, very rich meal that maybe had a lot of unhealthy things in it that would make me feel upset to my stomach. And not to say that pet food is unhealthy or anything like that, but maybe I had an intolerance to that. It's not necessarily an allergy to that. And so it may be that the digestibility of the food, the fat content of the food, the fiber content of the food is just not tolerated by that pet, and it's not necessarily an allergy.
Like, in fact, would you ever advise a grain-free diet?
So in a situation, some animals, we are going to want to put them on some type of elimination diet. And a lot of the some of the therapeutic diets for patients that have gastrointestinal disease. So for me as a nutritionist, I see a lot of patients that have chronic gastrointestinal disease. So a lot of these grain-free diets are a lot of the therapeutic diets. They may actually be a grain-free diet, but that animal is sick, and I want to try to put them on an elimination diet, which means I'm going to try to eliminate everything that's common in the pet food market. But again, using a therapeutic diet, it's going to be a lot different than using an over-the-counter diet, because we're going to have known digestibility values. We're going to have known nutritional profiles. These diets are typically going to be tested to make sure there's no cross-contamination. So there may be some instances where that's going to happen. But for the most part, most patients don't need to be on a grain-free diet specifically.
And to clarify, therapeutic diets, you're talking about I think we talked about this before, prescription diets, right? So you're talking about the companies that actually do the research and development. Those are the companies that your veterinarian will give you a therapeutic diet as almost a script. It's not something you buy over the counter, correct?
Right. They're therapeutic, so that means that you have to receive them through a prescription. So I think it's important to understand that these diets are like a drug to me as a nutritionist. I use these diets like a drug to make an intervention with the disease condition. So specifically in cases where we're trying to rule out some type of food allergy, we're going to eliminate, again, everything that's common over the counter. And now there are some limited ingredient diets that technically aren't grain-free, and I may still actually want to use those diets as well. And those again are going to be patients that are clinically sick. The other thing I wanted to add too is we keep talking about it's just grain-free diets, but also when we look at some other things that have occurred and been reported, it's also sometimes exotic ingredient diets. So like things that aren't very common. So I think the most common one is like kangaroo, and then also just even some type of boutique type diets. And I'd also warn owners that just because we're seeing these issues in some of these grain-free and exotic and boutique diets doesn't mean that we should all just run to home cooking unbalanced diets, which I see commonly. I have a lot of owners that they get worried about what's happening in the commercial pet food industry, so then they turn to an unbalanced home prepared diet. So it's really important that we make sure our dogs and our cats, if we're home cooking for them, that we're providing them complete and balanced nutrition. And honestly, we have the opportunity for our pets to give them complete and balanced nutrition every day, where I can't actually say that I ate a complete and balanced diet today. It consisted of a lot of coffee. So I did promise I had some protein and some other things in there as well. But I tell my clients, I feel really fortunate that I can actually ensure that my clients are going to have a complete and balanced diet every day.
Where do we stand with gluten-free diet? So that was the other thing. It's first it started with gluten-free and then it became
Right.
grain-free. So where do we start with gluten-free with respect to to our pets and so forth?
Yeah, so I think kind of a lot of that came from the trend in human nutrition for a lot of people going gluten-free, and certainly there are some people that absolutely need to be on gluten-free diets for sure. But it kind of rolled that a lot of some trendy things that happen in human nutrition sometimes roll over into our pet nutrition. That happens pretty commonly, actually. So another shout out, I'll say, to coconut oil, right on into veterinary nutrition. So it'll fix everything, including your wallet and your relationship and all those good things. So with gluten-free diets, there are some actual cases of animals that do have a gluten sensitivity, and it's important for us to recognize that that does happen, although it's very rare. In the literature, so in reports that are out there and studies that are out there, there is a group of Irish setter dogs. Now, this has been quite some time ago, so this isn't something that is very common, but there is a Irish setter gluten GI disorder. So if you put these Irish setters on a gluten-free diet, all of their GI signs get better and they do better. More recently, there's been a neurologic condition in border terriers that's been reported to be responsive to a gluten-free diet. And so that's been an important intervention for those patients as well. So that's what's been reported. And there may very well be other conditions out there that are obviously rare because we don't know about them. So there certainly are some conditions, but overall I would say gluten sensitivity or hypersensitivity in veterinary medicine is quite rare.
I always talk about balanceit.com, a website. What would be your recommendations be if a client is pretty adamant about making their own food for their pet?
Right. So that is a reputable resource for generating home prepared diets, and the owner has their ability to do some home prepared diet generation through that computer software themselves. A lot of the owners that I see that have healthy pets and they want to home cook, they're kind of looking for some more customization, some more personalization to their pet. And maybe they have some specific things that they're looking for, specific dietary concerns. And those are certainly things that I can help owners with and really be customizing that recipe just to them and their pet and their lifestyle and the way that they would like and what I do is I make sure that that diet is going to be complete and balanced for their pet for long-term feeding. And do some follow-up. And so there are also board certified veterinary nutritionists all over the country that do provide nutritional consultations. So if you don't live in New Jersey, where you have the ability to come and see a person like myself in person, the acvn.org website is a great reference for you to search for nutritionists that are providing clinical consultation, or also even consultation via telemedicine for you to get an appropriately formulated diet for your pets.
No, that's great. And yeah, and I always forget the fact how lucky I am to have someone so close that I could just reach out to and have my clients reach out to. So along those lines, Martha, how can people reach you? Because a lot of times if I get ill situations, cancer sort of things, I always talk about nutrition and the importance of it. And how can we just guide someone to you? What would be the best contact point?
Right. So the easiest way to contact myself to arrange an appointment is to call Red Bank Veterinary Hospital, is to call the main number there. And I have an amazing assistant. Her name is Sabrina. Most of my clients love talking to her, sometimes more than they love talking to me, which is awesome. And she's wonderful. So many times they're often going to talk to her first about booking an appointment. And it's really as simple as that. It's just booking the appointment. And then we, try to get people in as soon as we can. Obviously, sometimes we book out a little bit, but we're always there to be available to people. And I have some weekend hours and some evening hours to kind of help accommodate people's schedule a little bit better.
Oh, wow. That's great. And it's 732-747-3636. Is that the number?
That's it. Yep. That's it.
Okay.
We also have an email address, nutrition. It's just nutrition@rbvh.net. So the RBVH stands for Red Bank Veterinary Hospital.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Martha. You really clarified a lot about the grain-free and the gluten, and home cooking. I think that's, initially when we sat down to talk about this, we were just talking about the grain-free. So I'm glad to hear that these changes are not considered permanent for these grain-free diets. I'm also glad to hear that it's a low percentage of gluten-free issues that we have to deal with. And then if anyone has nutritional questions, it's just a matter of reaching out. So remember, everyone in the tri-state area or even beyond, you actually have someone. Like I said, when I first introduced Martha, is that she's one of the very few people that is in private practice. So it's really good that you could actually reach out to someone like her. And I'll put all that postings up for you. So if you want to reach out to Dr. Klein, easily do that. Well, thanks so much, Martha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, remember everyone, love your pet like they love you, and feed them a balanced diet. But love them like they love you, unconditionally. Have a great day.